This may seem like the last place on Earth you'd ever want to build anything. Yet it was the best location for building a canal that would join two oceans and change connections among regions of the world. Hello, I'm Tony Evans. The creation of the Panama Canal is a story of sacrifice and glory. More than 25,000 men, women, and children gave their lives to build this canal. What they built was at the time the world's largest dam and the biggest artificial lake. They also carved a 9-mile canyon through a mountain range. Without the driving force of one domineering personality, the Panama Canal might never have been built. President Theodore Roosevelt. He was the youngest United States president and a man of action. Why did Roosevelt choose Central America for the canal? Why was it built in Panama? And how did Panama's environment affect how the canal was built? Theodore Roosevelt believed in sea power. This book, written by his friend Alfred Mahan in 1890, had a great effect on his thinking. It was called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. At the time, Roosevelt was just another ambitious young politician. But he saw something in Mahan's book. He saw the key to great naval power, a United States canal located in Central America. With such a canal, connecting the Caribbean Sea with the Pacific Ocean, the United States could quickly move its warships from the Atlantic to the Pacific. In this way, the Navy could defend the entire U.S. coastline. Central America's unique location made it the obvious choice for a canal. It was easily reached from the east and west coasts of the United States, and it was the narrowest land separating the oceans. 10 years before he became president, Theodore Roosevelt saw clearly the need for a canal. A few people agreed with him, even though they knew the canal would be the most expensive construction project ever attempted. The idea never really caught public imagination until one event forced everyone to think about it. It happened during the Spanish-American War in 1898. The battleship USS Oregon, anchored in San Francisco, received emergency orders to join the fight in the Caribbean. After more than 2 months and a journey of 12,000 miles around the Horn of South America, the Oregon finally steamed into Santiago Bay, barely in time to help win a battle. If there had been a canal located in Central America, the journey would have been only 4,000 miles, 1/3 the length and 1/3 the time. Now everyone could see the need for a canal, and they knew the best location for it, Nicaragua. Some travelers considered Nicaragua a Central American paradise. It was a beautiful country with rolling green savannas and blue lakes. If a canal were built here, huge Lake Nicaragua could become a part of it. This would greatly reduce the digging. The other logical choice was Panama. Panama is an isthmus, a narrow strip of land that connects two larger masses of land. It was no paradise, but it offered the shortest route in Central America, only 50 miles from shore to shore. Would the canal be built in Nicaragua or Panama? Panama was smaller, but it had mountains which would be difficult to cross with a canal. Nicaragua was larger, but it was flat and had a huge lake. Maybe the best argument for Nicaragua was that someone else had already tried to build a canal in Panama. It was a story no one would soon forget. This man had led the earlier effort, Count Ferdinand de Lesseps, builder of the Suez Canal. He was charismatic, energetic, and wildly popular in his native France. In Egypt, de Lesseps and his crew had dug a 105-mile canal through the desert at sea level. His last great adventure, he told friends, would be a sea-level canal in Panama. The French began digging in 1881, but Panama was not like the deserts of Egypt. There were mountains, swamps, insects, unbearable heat and humidity. And unlike Egypt, there was rain, and too much of it. Panama's rainy season lasts for 8 months every year. The rain caused mudslides and flooded the Chagres River along the route of the canal. Still, every year, thousands of workers from Europe, the United States, and especially the West Indies came to Panama. And every year, thousands died from smallpox, typhoid, snakebite, malaria, and the infamous, terrifying yellow fever. One cartoonist asked, "Is Monsieur de Lesseps a canal digger or a grave digger?" After 9 years, de Lesseps' company ran out of money and collapsed. The French went home in disgrace, and their equipment was swallowed up by the rainforest. Panama, it seemed, could not be tamed. It was the wrong location to build a canal. But even though the French had failed, many others kept the dream alive. In 1901, Theodore Roosevelt became President of the United States and finally got his chance. He asked Congress for authorization to build an American canal in Nicaragua. Soon, however, Roosevelt began to have second thoughts. A canal in Panama, some engineers told him, could be built faster. And for Theodore Roosevelt, there was the irresistible challenge of trying to succeed where the French had not. The president changed his mind. Eventually, Congress agreed with Roosevelt and voted for Panama. But one stumbling block remained. Panama was owned and ruled by Colombia, and its government wanted a huge payment from the United States for the right to build a canal. Negotiations dragged on. Finally, some influential people in Panama got tired of waiting and decided to free themselves from Colombia. The Panamanian Revolution of 1903 lasted only 1 day. It was an instant success because a United States gunboat prevented Colombia from landing any troops. Theodore Roosevelt's critics were furious. No one had given him authority to aid a revolution in Panama. In one speech, Roosevelt told an excited crowd, "I took the isthmus, started the canal, and then left Congress not to debate the canal, but to debate me." It wasn't exactly true, but the crowd loved it. In November 1903, the United States signed a treaty to build the canal. For $10 million, the United States bought the right to build a canal through a new territory called the Canal Zone, 10 miles wide and 50 miles long. The United States would control the land and the canal. "Now," said Theodore Roosevelt, "we will make the dirt fly." Unfortunately, the first chief engineer had no plan for building the canal. The first year of the American effort in Panama was a disaster. Roosevelt fired the chief engineer and hired a new one, John Stevens. 52 years old, rugged, powerful, considered by many to be the best construction engineer in the United States. Stevens' first priority on the isthmus was to make it a safe and decent place to live. His greatest ally was his chief health officer, Dr. William Gorgas. Unlike the French doctors before him, Gorgas knew the truth about malaria and yellow fever. The diseases were spread by mosquitoes. Panama was an ideal place for mosquitoes. The deadly insects bred in standing fresh water near every house, every office, along the entire line of the canal. Malaria was more widespread, but it was yellow fever that caused panic. It was a violent and gruesome sickness. Most patients died and were quickly buried. To protect the workers against disease, Dr. Gorgas organized what was then the largest, most expensive health and sanitation campaign in history. His cleanup brigades used every modern technique known at the time. They fumigated houses, cleaned every ditch, paved the streets and the sidewalks, and drained the swamps. They sprayed oil on puddles of standing water. Their goal was to wipe out every place where mosquitoes could breed. Then the buildings went up. Houses for the workers, a fire station, schools, bakeries, a YMCA, even a dance hall. Stevens and his workers created whole towns in the middle of a tropical forest 2,000 miles from home. And by the end of the second year, yellow fever had disappeared in the canal zone. Once the real digging started, John Stevens saw why the French had failed. This location was simply too mountainous to dig all the way down to sea level. Stevens told President Roosevelt about his plan for a lock and lake canal. From the ocean, a ship could be lifted to the level of an artificial lake. Watertight chambers, called locks, would fill with lake water and raise the ship. On the other side of the isthmus, the ship could be lowered in the same way. It was a simple, brilliant design. There were no pumps in the whole system. Water and gravity did all the work. Theodore Roosevelt approved the plan. Now most of the serious digging was concentrated here. The canal would follow a 9-mile path straight through the heart of these mountains. It was called the Culebra Cut, and it was the engineering marvel of its time. The real problem wasn't digging. It was how to get rid of the earth and rock. Stevens designed a complex network of trains that never stopped running. Some days there were more than 60 steam shovels in the cut, filling the train's cars. Much of the earth and rock went to build the world's largest earthen dam at Gatun. Once the Chagres River basin behind the dam filled with water, it would create a huge artificial lake. It seemed as though every part of the canal was the biggest, grandest thing ever made. After 2 years of work, Theodore Roosevelt came to Panama. It was the first time any United States president had ever left the country while in office, and Roosevelt couldn't have been happier about it. Never mind that it was the middle of the rainy season. Roosevelt toured the entire 50-mile path of the canal in just 3 days, much of it on foot. He talked to all kinds of workers, the engineers and the diggers. He ate with them, and he never stopped asking questions about the canal. At the controls of a steam shovel, the president told the workers, "You are doing the biggest thing of the kind that has ever been done, and I wanted to see how you were doing it." After Theodore Roosevelt's visit, it seemed only a matter of time before the canal was finished. Then, out of the blue, John Stevens quit. His reasons remain a mystery to this day. Most likely, Stevens was just overworked, near exhaustion. President Roosevelt appointed as his new chief engineer someone who couldn't quit, Army Colonel George Washington Goethals. No one could have been more different from John Stevens. Goethals was formal, polite, spotless in his white uniform. The workers didn't like him at first, but slowly he gained their trust and ran things brilliantly, in his own style. As before, the work continued at Culebra Cut. Thousands of new workers, mainly from Caribbean islands, came to join in. They thought the pay was terrific. $6 a week for 60 hours of work. 60 hard, dangerous hours. Every day, the temperature at the bottom of the cut reached 120 degrees. If you survived that, you might be killed by falling rock or accidental explosions of dynamite. And there was the rain. Some months, it rained every day, all day. The sides of the mountains often collapsed, burying men and machinery. Despite the hardships, nearly all the workers, the diggers, shovel operators, nurses, and cooks, believed they were part of a great adventure. They would remember it with pride the rest of their lives. George Goethals supervised every detail as the great locks were built at the two ends of the canal. On the Caribbean side, a set of 3 connected locks were constructed at Gatun. Huge steel cableways were used to carry the buckets of cement. On the Pacific side, 1 lock was built at Pedro Miguel and 2 at Miraflores, about a mile away. Another artificial lake connected the locks. Year after year, the work went on. George Goethals ran things so well that his workers dug more in 1 day than the French had in a month. The biggest obstacles were Panama's climate, terrain, and its distance from sources of material in the United States. The first test run was made in October 1913. The tugboat Gatun became the first ship to pass through the Panama Canal. Everything worked perfectly. The grand opening was in August 1914, as the Atlantic steamer Ancon took a new shortcut to the Pacific. There were no parades, no celebrations. In America, everyone's attention had turned to Europe and the beginning of the First World War. Theodore Roosevelt's dream came true in 1915, when American battleships passed from sea to sea through the canal. In 1919, an armada of 33 ships made the transit. Because of its location in Central America, the Panama Canal became a vital link in the world's transportation chain. On a trip from New York to San Francisco, it saves 8,000 miles, compared to rounding the Horn of South America. Perhaps more important, the canal made sea trade between Western Europe, North America, and East Asia quicker and cheaper. Today, the canal handles 12,000 ships a year, 24 hours a day. It takes about 8 hours to make the 50-mile transit. Ships carry Italian clothing, Japanese electronics, and German cars. Every ship that passes through uses 52 million gallons of water in the locks. The rain fills the lakes, and the lakes fill the locks. Panama's rain, the curse of the French and American engineers, turned out to be the very thing that makes the canal possible. The canal works because it works with the country's environment, not against it. Except for the locks, it looks like a natural part of the landscape. There's no clue that the path you're traveling was built at a tremendous human cost. In 1977, the USA and Panama signed a new treaty. By its terms, the canal will belong to Panama at noon, December 31, 1999. The canal will remain neutral, but the United States has the right to defend and protect it. The canal is still considered an important military location. Theodore Roosevelt died in 1919. He never saw the Panama Canal after it opened, but he believed it was a great achievement. At the beginning of his presidency, in 1901, he had said, "No single great material work which remains to be done on this continent is of such importance to the American people." Why did the United States build a canal where it did? And why is the canal's location still important today?